Welcome back to here at PA High School Football Report Podcast. We are powered by PennLive. That is Dan Sosnick, Eric Epler over here. We're bringing you another week of high school football, postseason football, which is always the most exciting time. And I think, Dan, this is probably the best week that we have because a lot of our teams, obviously we move into District 3, which we did last week to start the postseason. Great slate of games to start out. Couple lopsided matches, but a couple barn burners too, Hershey being one. And a comeback win over Exeter. So now what we want to do is kind of push forward and look at some of the teams that are actually doing really good things and are actually on tap now, just outside of District 3. We got a couple District 6. We got a championship going on in 6A, of course, 2 Commonwealth Division teams. In State College in Altoona, that'll take place in Hollidaysburg. We got Line Mountain and a barn burner against state-ranked Troy in a semifinal for District 4 2A. And by the way, the other semifinal is Mount Carmel and Southern Columbia, which may be the most heated rivalry in the country. Yeah, I think there's a lot of bad blood there. Anyway, but they're in a semifinal. Excuse me. And then you got Juniata hosting a District 6 4A championship. The Indians just won another title, a District 6 4A title last week. So they're still moving on. So we got a lot going on outside of District 3. And, of course, we got a lot going on inside District 3. So, Dan, I wanted to ask you, of course, we start every podcast by you giving us your report on your 2 favorite teams who really, let's just face it, they're not good.
Well, but I was covering soccer during the entire day on Saturday, so I only caught bits and pieces during half times and when I looked down on my phone and saw stuff. It actually seemed like the Pitt defense came to play, which the two teams have been pretty similar.
Flashes.
It's one of those things where both the Pitt and the New England Patriots, they just keep trying their defense out. They get stops the first couple of possessions. Then the offense goes 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out. And, that's all I have to say about that because there's like nothing to say about those two teams. They've made me hate football, but luckily we get to like football by watching what we get this week. So
it's tough. It's tough when the season goes bad early too.
Yeah,
it's tough keeping that train on the tracks. Anyway, all right. So what we thought we'd do, Dan, real quick, down and dirty this week. We're gonna pick out a couple of District 3 matchups that we like. And talk a little bit about, maybe what can happen in these games, what's going to happen. And this is really the nitty-gritty week. This is kind of the week where everything kind of separates themselves. You start getting into semifinals next week with the higher classifications. And, of course, some of the lower classifications like Steel High are in sub-regionals or, actually in PIAA playoff games this week. So this is a very, very valuable, important pivot point in the postseason. So, what game are you talking about first?
I'm gonna go. One of our few all mid Penn matchups this week, going to the District 3 2A District Championship game between Camp Hill and Trinity. The battle for Camp Hill between the two teams that have already played each other before. It was a thriller, right? I believe 14-13 final score.
That's right.
Came down to Camp Hill making the, in my opinion, correct decision to go for 2 to beat that team. It didn't work out, but it's about process over results sometimes, and I think you take that chance to gain 1 yard over winning that game in overtime.
Absolutely. Yep.
And I think that I don't think a lot of people thought Camp Hill would be here with the matchup they had in the first round of District 3 going up to Annville, Cleona, and Lebanon. And not only did they win that game, they blew the doors off Annville, Cleona.
Yeah.
And I think we might have underestimated how ready Drew Brandstetter is for this moment. So, quarterback for Camp Hill. And that's kind of my question, right? Do you think with Drew Brandstetter, because he was kind of easing his way back in from injury from that game, right? And now he's kind of back. Camp Hill's playing good football now with him. I'm interested to see this result because I think a lot of people probably are circling Trinity because they've got the Penn State commit Messiah Mickens. They've got a lot of talent on that team. They've been playing good football as well, but especially on the defensive end, which I think gets overlooked a lot because of Messiah.
Right.
I think the Trinity defense has been really good all year, led by Jacob Ness, Michael Johnson, those guys back there. But I think it's going to be a competitive game, at least at least early on. The thing that you always worry about a little bit with Camp Hill is depth. They don't have a ton of depth, but I think they've got guys they can rely on. I'm looking forward to them. Chip.
I think it's imperative that Trinity gets off to a fast start in this game.
Yeah.
If they want to be, I think if Camp Hill and Branstad are allowed to get off and kind of dictate tempo here in the first 12, 15 minutes of the game,
Yeah.
I think Trinity would be in serious trouble, and I think Camp Hill could certainly rip off this victory. We were somewhat skeptical. A lot of us last week we were talking about Camp Hill sort of beating Anvil Cleona as the top seed because Anvil Cleona for and don't get me wrong, a heck of a program and heck of a scheme that they run. But if you sort of shut off that main valve, can the other parts of Anvil sort of control what really is a wide open offense?
Yeah.
For Camp Hill. I mean, Branstad really runs it's a pro style sort of offense. You've got those guys, any one of those guys like Noah Doy, Cubby Moore, Becker. We could probably name it Alex Long, can sort of implode and kind of lean field, and then the guys go the other way and beat you that way. So Camp Hill's a very tricky offense to play against. You've got to be very athletic in the secondary, and you've got to be very athletic too in kind of the in that 6 to 10 yard range too, because they will shift in and throw sort of short, precise passes to kind of suck you in a little bit, so they can maybe get some deep shots. And that's tough to compete against, but you're right. I do like Trinity's defense in this. We said guys like Ness and Colin Morrow and these guys have played tremendous most of the season. I just expected. I think I expected a more dominant sort of performance. Is 28-3 dominant? Yes.
Yeah.
But I thought that it'd be a more complete performance from Trinity against the Lone Catholic, and not seeing that and seeing that now the steam that Camp Hill has coming off of the win against Anvil Cleona. This one is very intriguing to me now. Very intriguing. I would have probably made Trinity a touchdown or 8-point favorite, something like that going in. But now I am not so sure. Yeah, I don't know who I'm going to pick now, to be honest with you.
And it is I'm interested to see the crowd there too, because I think, sometimes it's not the biggest, Coba's not the biggest field in the Mid-Penn.
Right.
But I think, with the proximity of schools, I think it's going to be a pretty fun crowd there as well.
Yeah, it should be. It should be. All right, I'm going to morph over, Dan. I'm going to move to the 4A landscape here, and I'm going to say Susquehanna Township at Manheim Central. Now, anybody's been around Mid-Penn for a while knows there is some postseason history between these two. It is lopsided, but there have been some really close games with these two because of, and I think it's for the same reasons that you're going to see maybe a closer game here too. I still put obviously Manheim Central. I still believe the Barons are one of these benchmark programs in our district. I think Dave Hahn has done a great job with the program, and they just sort of wheeled you into submission a lot of times. Yeah. They're just bigger and badder, that kind of thing, and kind of tell you how the game's going to go, and that's always a bad thing for the opposition.
Yeah.
But they're very balanced offensively. Zach Hahn, the quarterback, obviously the kid, coach's son, has been really good. I think he's completing nearly 70%. And Aaron Enterline leads a receiving core that's just been lights out too for all season long, really. I mean, yes, they had one setback against Cocalico, but Cocalico tends to do that to you and just drive you down a little bit. So, I wonder how productive for how long Susquehanna Township could be, because I think they could score some points in this game. It's just a matter of, can they stay consistent? Can they sort of not turn the ball over and basically keep Central on their toes for 48 minutes? That's a big ask.
Yeah.
That's a big ask when you're dealing with the Barons to do anything like that. So I still think Hannah's got sort of a puncher's chance to get this into the fourth quarter. I don't know if they will, but it's still a very intriguing matchup to me because this Susquehanna Township team has shown a lot more consistency in what they do offensively, and they're not just chuck and chase.
Yeah.
It's not just jet, go over the top. It is very sort of precise. It's well thought out. The coaching has been really, really good for Hannah this year. So I look for them to give give the Barons a little bit of fits.
Well, you know what
I don't
I
know
think
how
has
long.
really helped them is Jarrett Kern emerging as sort
Yes,
of a
that's
slot
been huge.
like an
Yeah.
inside type guy that can, take the pressure off of, teams just dropping back and making sure Lex Cyrus doesn't beat you deep.
Yep.
Because then, Jarrett Kern's going to go 6 for 65 and a touchdown. And then you have to start, covering his little inside routes and
Yep.
everything. All of a sudden, Lex Cyrus beats you deep and, 7 points on the board in 10 seconds. So I think that's a reason you can never quit Susquehanna Township, right? Even in these
Right.
matchups, is they have that high end and a lot of times when we're talking about these, up and down teams that have the high end talent, they're kind of lacking in depth. Susquehanna Township's got a big roster with a lot of
Yep.
guys to throw at you, which is I think important in a game against a team like Manheim Central that's always going to have a pretty big roster as well. So yeah, I think that's a good call there. I think that'll be a competitive matchup for Susquehanna Township.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So what's the second game for you?
I'm going another rematch, and this one is a game that I covered week 1 of the regular season. Central Dauphin, Central York battle. I'm going to 6A. There are a lot of good matchups in 6A, but I really can't get a read on Central Dauphin. We've been saying it all year. It's really tough. There's certain games they look like world beaters. Other games they look like they just weren't ready to play. That the week 1 game was a really strange one where they gave 300 yards and 6 touchdowns to Jules Goff. They still 10-point game, I believe, or it was late.
Yeah.
Yep. And that was a game that Glenn McNamee seemed really upset that his team lost. He felt that was a team they should win, the game they should have won. Central York's 10-0 on the year. That was one of their, they've played a lot of close games, so it's not a 10-0. It's not like one of those 18-0 Patriots 10-0s where they were just blowing the doors off everyone. Right. It's definitely a team that Central Dauphin can beat. I think the key is that they have been giving up a lot of big plays on defense. I think the offense has been sustainable. There have been some games where I think Kieron Plummer's played great. There have been some games where I think he'd want some throws back because Mateo Crummel gets open, and
yes,
I think
he does.
I think he's a big equal. I think if they can connect on some big plays early and put some game pressure on Central York and make Central York, turn away from their heavy run attack with Goff and kind of force the sophomore quarterback to, drop back and throw a little bit, I think it could be an interesting game because I think Central Dauphin has the talent to, play up to these teams. We saw the Harrisburg game last week. That was a blowout, and that's who they'd have to play the next week. I think that they feel like they could at least make that game a little more competitive than it was a week ago. But, they have to get by Central York first.
Yeah, I would just like to see Central Dauphin, and I've only seen them twice live, but twice this year. But I would just like to see sort of an elevated, for lack of a better word, attitude.
Yep.
I would really, because I think there's probably 10 to 12 really, really, really good football players on that team, and the rest are sort of following their lead.
Yeah.
Of those that dozen or Baker's dozen of guys too, and I'd like to see just a little bit more fire out of them because I know the talent's there, and they've shown it. They've shown it during long periods this year, and this is a very winnable game for them. But they do have to get Central out of their comfort zone. They do have to somehow get that 306 TD effort from Goff out of their head.
And I think that's why I think McNamee was so upset, was because I think he felt like the team had a plan to bottle. And to be fair, it's not easy to bottle up Jules Goff.
No,
right?
absolutely not. He's a pit recruit for a reason.
Yeah.
The guy's a tremendous athlete.
And the thing that they struggled with is you just can't let that kid get it. You have to set the edge. You can't let him get outside the tackles, because he's gonna beat your guys to the target. He's gonna get there. So.
Absolutely. I mean, and he's a tremendous athlete. Their offensive line has been really good, but you're also right in the fact that should they probably have been a little bit more dominant against Red Lions of the world, Dallas Towns of the world? And the answer is yes. And again, everyone has that. Especially when you're playing 6A.
Yeah.
And in a tough, you go really tough non-con into something like the Commonwealth. You're going to have a week 6 or week 7 game where you're a little beat up, and you're not going to look as sharp as maybe the people from, supporters of the program or people from the outside want you to look.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But the fact is, you find a way to win football games, and that's what Central York has done.
Yeah.
And they've done it sort of their way most of the year, particularly in that opener against Central Dolphins. So CD just has to, listen, you're here now. It doesn't matter that they're 10-0 and you're 6-4.
Yeah.
None of that matters now. You know you can beat this football team, so you got to go out and just get it done.
Yeah,
just get it done. Find a way to get it done. And I think Coach Mack gets licked. When you said he was a little ticked off at that one, and it's just because, again, I go back to when the Rams are playing really well, their defense is leading the charge, and I think that coaching staff knows that.
Yeah.
And to be shredded like that is embarrassing.
Yeah.
That's an embarrassing way to get beat. And they certainly don't want that to happen again. So
I'm sure they're watching that film a lot this week.
I would think so.
Yeah,
yes.
I'm sure.
I would think so.
I'm sure there's been some raised voice is the right word, because that's not really necessarily their style, but I think a lot of laser pointing at
Okay, here, stop it. Boom,
Yeah.
What's this? Yeah, I agree with you. All right, the last one, Dan, that I've seen too, and again, I have no feel, in a good way, I have no feel for how this game is going to go. But Lampeter Strasburg versus Pennsboro.
Oh yeah,
just because it could be mass chaos on the field. It could be one of the most physical games that we see this weekend. It could be a shootout. I don't know. But a lot of different things can happen in this football game. But what we know, having seen East Pennsboro a couple of times, is that no matter what's happening, whether they're up 21 or down 21, going in the fourth quarter or even, or whatever the scenario is, they are going to play to the absolute last whistle.
Yep.
And it's going to be fun, and it's going to be just an entertaining ball game. And Lampeter Strasburg, to me, is almost in that Manhattan Central realm as far as benchmark programs. They've been so successful over the past 10, 15 years. They're always in the mix. They're always difficult to beat. You need to hike up your britches to beat LS.
Yeah.
And we know a team like East Pennsboro can do that. So I don't know how this one is gonna play out. Like I said, I don't have a great feel for it. But I know it's gonna be a really good tit for tat when you're talking East Penn QB versus Mellinger, the running back for LS. That should be pretty fun to watch.
Yeah, I mean, it's been such a special year for East Pennsboro, right? And
yeah.
You imagine the rallying cry right now is, we haven't accomplished anything yet, right? That they have to kind of shift that mindset from, man, we had one of the best regular season program history, to, hey, this is not what we did that for. We did this to get that bye. That's what we got. But now we have a tough matchup against, a team that's been here more frequently than we have, right?
Yep.
So at that point, again, we said it before, you throw away the records, you throw away the seeds, you have the home field advantage. It's gonna be a grind, and I think the Northern loss was probably pretty good for East Pennsboro.
I think when you look back on this season, I think it's probably.
I think it's good to kind of. I think that if you went into that game as East Pennsboro, 10-0, Sporting, just imagine that they were still playing Lampeter, even though they'd have a different seed.
Right.
Go into that game 10-0, feeling like you're unbeatable, going up against a team that's been here more frequently, more consistently than you at this stage. That would be a kind of ripe for an upset type situation for me. So I think that the fact that they kind of got a slice of humble pie from Northern,
right? Realized,
hey, Northern wasn't a team that was, they weren't 8-2, they were 2-7 or whatever at the time, and definitely not that. And the fact that they came in there and beat you probably makes you realize, hey, we got to be on our P's and Q's. We can't make silly mistakes. We've got to execute, and I think that's gonna be big for them. And those kids are no nonsense. There's some teams that are kind of giddy after wins and everything.
Exactly.
Like that. Keith Otis is not. He's all business. So I think they're on a mission. So I agree. I think it'll be a fun game.
Yeah, it's going to be an excellent game. There's a bunch of them. Get out there and watch some football, postseason football. I don't know, tickets maybe a few extra dollars.
Yeah, I think it's like one or two extra dollars
postseason, but it's worth it. It's worth it, and the weather's nice.
Yeah, it's creepily. It's freaking me out how nice it is.
Awesome. All right, Dan. Well, I appreciate your time. Obviously, thanks for joining us again for another edition of PA High School Football Report podcast. For Dan Sosnick and Eric Epler, get out there and watch some football, and join us next week as we wrap things up from a great first session, quarterfinals in 6A, and of course we just dot right down the line. So we'll see you next week. Thanks.